Hospitality Meets is brought to you by RotaCloud, the simple workforce management software for hospitality teams. RotaCloud lets you create and share rotas, record attendance, and manage your team's annual leave, all in less time than it takes to make a brew. It can also make life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request holiday, and even pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Find out how much easier managing your team can be by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and receive 2 months free plus VIP onboarding to help you hit the ground running, just in time for that festive rush.
Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality.
Today's guest is Roshana Gammampila, co-managing director of the Devagiri Tea Estate in Sri Lanka.
Coming up on today's show,
Roshana offers Phil a job.
I wish you were a BD person.
Phil shows his age.
We used to do wine tours, but now a tea tour is way more appealing.
And Roshana shows that not all decisions are great ones.
And then from there, I made a disastrous move.
All that and so much more as we chat through Roshana's awesome and inspiring journey to the Devagiri Tea Estate, where she is disrupting the way that tea estates do business and turning it into a force for good. It's yet another amazing journey from within hospitality. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share it wherever you can. Enjoy!
And a huge Hospitality Meets welcome to Roshana Gammampila.
Hello, thank you.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very, very welcome. And this is probably a question that I always ask, but with you it's maybe a little bit more important because we're in a time zone difference for this discussion. So where are you at this moment?
I'm in Sri Lanka, and the time is 2:00 in the afternoon, 8 minutes past 2.
Okay. And I'm recording at 9:30 in the morning or something like that. So there's the time difference. And what makes you be there? What are you doing out there?
Well, we have a tea estate here, and that's fundamentally why we're here. We relocated to Sri Lanka in July. We've been kind of running things remotely for the previous sort of 18 months, and then made the big bold move. So it's been 2 months, and I would say we are, almost 3 months now, just about settled.
Great stuff. Okay. And just tell the world what it is that you actually are doing there.
Okay. It's funny actually. I have imposter syndrome answering this question because we haven't done this for all that long. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the quick answer to your question would be, we run a tea estate, but that just feels still very strange to say because we've only been doing it for just under 2 years, and my background and my partner's background were sort of completely removed. But yeah, we kind of left our London City careers and. We raised funds to buy a tea estate, and that's what we do now.
Fantastic. And I should say, and this is not like a soulless plug or anything, but I do have your vanilla infusion in my little brew right here, right now. And vanilla and tea for me are like win-win because I love vanilla and I love tea. So yeah, cheers. Thanks very much.
Yes, I'm so pleased. The vanilla was interesting because it's not a combination that had really occurred to me, not something I'd come across. And then we were speaking to somebody who'd spent a lot of time in Melbourne. And apparently there, this is quite a popular combination. So that's why we've done what we've done. Yeah.
Yeah, I was introduced to vanilla in coffee. In France, actually, maybe 10 or so years ago, changed my life.
Yeah.
So now vanilla in tea is doing the same thing.
Yeah, no, vanilla is a beautiful flavour and also kind of indigenous to Sri Lanka. So
Great. Yeah. Well, we'll get into what you're doing now in a lot more depth as we get through the conversation. But actually what I'd love to do first, you already kind of touched upon it, is that this life that you have now is not the life that you had. So take us all the way back and just give us a kind of run through of your life and times and how you've ended up here.
Goodness. Yeah. So this is probably the most extreme, but even prior to this move, my career had sort of, it just wasn't linear.
I like that though. I like that.
It wasn't linear is the sort of sophisticated way of putting it. It was sort of random is how others might describe it. But I was one of those kids that knew too early what they wanted to be. And I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I did my A-levels and had a gap year and spent some time in Romania working with kids with HIV. And that just had such a profound influence on me. I really enjoyed it. I found it rewarding. And I decided actually I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. So I came back to the UK, started uni in Norwich, and kind of suffered through my law degree for 3 years, just totally disengaged really from this subject that I had thought would be my passion, because I wanted to be an international aid worker. And so I finished my law degree, and I was so lucky to get a role at Save the Children straight out of uni. And the reason I got the role was actually because of the law degree, because it was in fundraising, in a sort of compliance type area of fundraising. So that's how I got in there. I spent the first 6 years of my career at Save the Children, where I did train to be an international aid worker, as was my dream. But in the event, my actual career there progressed in fundraising in London.
Right. I would imagine, and please correct me if I'm completely wrong here, but law and going into aid working is probably not a bad, it's not a bad grounding to have, is it?
Yeah, so absolutely. So certainly in terms of the kind of human rights sort of side of aid, yeah, there is. And actually, it's funny you say that, because at Save the Children, in my last couple of years, I did a master's in law and political justice. So exactly as the penny dropped for me, and I realized actually perhaps it's a good thing that I have this background. And so I tried to sort of build on it. And it's funny, people often quote Steve Jobs, who said something along the lines of join the dots backwards. And as my career's gone on, I would say, as I said earlier, it's been random, but now when I look back, everything has really taught me something that has been super valuable and that I still rely on now.
Wonderful. I mean, there's a wonderful message in there, right, about the moment that you find yourself in, if whatever it is that you're doing is not connecting with you, maybe just stick it out and get to the end of that, and because you never know when that might then serve its purpose down your own story.
Absolutely. So 6 years at Save the Children. So that would have taken me to being in my kind of late 20s. And I decided at the height of economic downturn that I'd like to leave the charity sector and move to the private sector.
Right.
Not perhaps the most commercial thinking on my part, or most commercially aware thinking. But the reason for that was I was feeling like I kind of wanted a different challenge. I had this perception that actually in the private sector I would get that challenge. So I went looking for it, and it took me, no joke, a year of application after application after application before I even got an interview.
Is that right?
Yep. It was,
wow. And do you think that is because of the private sector's perception of the charity sector?
Yes.
Pure and simple.
I would say... Yes, that is ultimately what I think. I'm sure, though, that perhaps there were weaknesses in my CV as well, so I don't want to just blame it on external factors. But yes, I think generally, and I did see this myself having joined the private sector, there is a lack of understanding of what the transferable skill set might be.
Yeah.
And also, London's so competitive.
Yeah, and sort of thinking about this just purely from a recruitment hat perspective, I recruit by day, as it were, in inverted commas. Whenever we're given briefs for things, of course, we're trying to tick as many boxes of that brief as possible. And if people are not conforming to the brief, it takes a very strong recruitment consultant to be able to say to their client, look, this does not conform to your brief because of X, Y, Z, but you really need to see this person because of X, Y, Z. And that's where I suppose the real wonderment can happen from a consultative perspective when you're helping in that way. But equally, I'm very guilty of seeing a CV and going, well, that doesn't fit, and moving on to the next.
Yeah, and a CV is so limited, isn't it? I mean, it's
totally.
So little you can glean, and you get so many. But actually, what happened really speaks to sort of what you're saying there. In the end, I was hired by my recruiter. So the recruitment consultant that had been working with me put me forward. Didn't put me forward. Had talked to me and said, "There's nothing I can put you forward for, really," but kept in touch with me. And then actually said, "Well, actually, we think that your skill set could work here." So it was a recruitment company called Fresh Minds. They focused mainly on graduate recruitment, but they were part of a small group of companies, one area of which was a tech company. So I joined them in an operations role, and that immediately gave me the opportunity to kind of broaden my skill set. And then from there, I made a disastrous move that I won't talk about publicly. I only stayed at the next place for 6 months. It just wasn't a good fit at all. But then I found myself accepted to PwC. And my role at PwC, it was really fortuitous. I was one of their first technology hires. And I joined the firm just as it was thinking about digitizing its own ways of working and automating and thinking about what that might mean for clients. And so I was really very much right place, right time. And so I was with them for 6 years, and I had the opportunity to build their first tech and innovation function, which we scaled from 5 people to over 300 if you include our contractors and various people we're working with.
Wow.
Really interesting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds it. And look at that as well from a journey perspective of getting all of these rejections.
Yes.
And you know, like the lesson here for any people listening to the journey, you know, is don't look at the CV, look at the person, look at the potential of the person. Because, you know, to go from all of those rejections then into that role, I mean, everybody probably in the world has heard of PwC.
Yes.
Quite remarkable.
Yes. Well, I would say my experience at PwC was actually it's a great organization in the sense that if you are talented and if you demonstrate the ability to kind of make an impact, then opportunity kind of opens up for you. And as I say, it was right place, right time in terms of technology. So then, yeah, I was with them, did COVID with them as well. So I moved back to crazy world of remote working. And then I joined Toyota.
Of course.
As you do. You know.
At this point, are you just like picking up if there even is a directory, phone directory these days, and going
Exactly.
like that? I'll just that one will do.
Exactly.
That one will do.
So Toyota has a subsidiary in Europe called Toyota Connected. They look after all the data from the cars. So most of the cars now that are on the road emit a lot of data every minute. So hundreds and hundreds, thousands even of data points. And so our subsidiary dealt with all that data in Europe. So in terms of doing various kind of analytics and feedback work for kind of manufacturing and design teams, all the way through to developing and running the companion apps for all Toyota and Lexus vehicles in Europe. I was very lucky. I was brought on there on the executive leadership team as VP of product. And I think that is less about me probably and more about PwC's creds, if I'm honest. But joined the leadership team there anyway, and then also was asked to cover the role of COO while they had a bit of a gap there. So I was acting COO and VP of product there. And then this crazy opportunity came along in Sri Lanka. So I decided to make yet another crazy change.
I mean, it kind of blows my mind a little bit, but I also kind of almost understand it from a human level as well, because I've got 2 parents who absolutely flew at their corporate careers and then got to a certain point and thought, is this us? Is this what I really want to be doing? And then ripped up the rule book and basically went off to an island on the west coast of Scotland and converted a church into a hotel.
Wow.
Yeah, totally. And so I kind of understand that there's probably within us all of this moment where you question your direction, or was it just a case of something kind of landed on your desk, as it were, and you thought, maybe?
It was, I think, a number of factors. One, which I didn't mention, was a few years prior, my ex-husband and I had adopted two little boys, 3 and 4 they were when they came to us. So our sons and we were very, very naive. I mean, I would describe it now as we had this great London life. We used to go out for drinks. We used to go for brunch. And then just like that overnight, suddenly we had a baby gate in our house. Yeah. And we had all these responsibilities. But actually I was at that time, I think I'd just made director at PwC when that happened, and the boys went straight into school. So actually my parenting was somewhat limited to the weekend because we had an after school nanny. And it wasn't till COVID hit that I had my children full time. So unusual as a mum, but it was when COVID hit that I had them 24/7. And with that, I got a bit more involved in their schoolwork and things. And so that, I suppose, started taking up greater headspace in general. And their father and our marriage ended, and he'd moved to Sri Lanka. So he works for McKinsey, and he set up McKinsey in Sri Lanka. And when we split, it was all very amicable, but I'd always said at some point I will bring the boys to live in Sri Lanka so that they can be near you. And so we'd been doing all this traveling, and it was on kind of my radar that, this is something, if in the right circumstances, this is something we'd like to do. And my current partner was very supportive of this. And the first time, when he started visiting Sri Lanka, he liked it and was sort of open-minded. And he is a bit older than me, so at a different stage career-wise. He'd sort of retired from his full-time corporate career and was ready for the next chapter. And then we were on holiday in Sri Lanka, and we were in the vicinity of Devagiri, and we decided to pay it a visit. The Devagiri, of course, had been set up by my grandfather in 1947.
Right.
And it was being run by my mum and her 9 siblings. But they are now in their 80s, 70s, 80s, and the business had really been struggling for about the last 15 years. And so it was so kind of in such a bad way that they were looking to sell it. So I was aware of this in the background, but because I'd mentioned there, my mum is one of 10, I have 22 first cousins actually on that side of the family. So our proximity to this business was very limited. So
Right.
It's kind of in there in the background. And we just visited because I wanted to show the kids the working tea estate. We were in the area. And then when we visited, we were chatting to people and realized that actually there was this significant fear that if the property was sold to a company that wasn't going to run it as a tea estate, so if they were going to run it for tourism or somehow repurpose the land, then the resident community would be made homeless. And we were sort of really surprised by that. And there's kind of a long history and explanation as to why that is the case, which I'm sure we'll get into. But that kind of hearing that, we just thought, gosh, there must be something we can do about it. And then what started as, oh, that's unfair, what can we do, kind of turned into, well, actually, if we were to raise funds, could we run this? What would that look like? It was all very naive, to be honest. It was very sort of wanting to do the right thing, but incredibly naive, incredibly ignorant, frankly, of the complexity of the industry. But, that was kind of what we saw, what we were inspired by. And then that's why we made the decision to do this.
Yeah, do you know what though? You talk about naivety. I actually have come to know that being naive is one of the most wonderful traits in entrepreneurialism, because otherwise, if you think things through too much, then nothing gets done. And almost going at something up, I've had so many entrepreneurs on this show who say the same thing, that without that naivety, maybe we're not here having this discussion, because you talk yourself out of it. Your naivety has only shown you the upside. It hasn't shown you all of the stuff that you probably will have to wade through to actually get to a positive place.
Yeah, and believe me, you're absolutely right. Had we fully understood, I'm not sure we'd have done this.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I also kind of made a note earlier on, because we obviously spoke before to give me a kind of loose sense of your journey, etc., etc. And then knowing obviously where you've ended up doing what you're doing now, I made a note actually when you said that you took a year out to go and basically help people. So I can see that this seems to be something that is a kind of deep part of your value set. Whether you've kind of, I suppose, fathomed that out in terms of actually writing down what are my values or anything, I don't know. But it seems that there's a part of you that's driven by trying to, I suppose, do the right thing by people.
Yes. In terms of, I guess so. In terms of writing values out, I remember when I was at PwC doing one of these corporate exercises around what drives you and values. And one of the things for me was that I am really sort of triggered, to use the modern language around it, by injustice. So, it's interesting because when I started my career after I volunteered, I would have hated the thought that I'd end up in a corporate. So if you'd asked me this 2 years ago, I'd have said, my God, my 19-year-old self would say, what the hell are you doing? I would have hated that. But I moved to the corporate sector, to develop myself for a challenge. And actually, once I'd moved to the corporate sector, I felt that I was doing valuable work there as well. But I'm doing what we're doing now because of the kind of social factors of it and the social impact we hope to have. Is definitely, I find myself more motivated than I perhaps have been elsewhere.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's talk about that then. Let's talk about your transition from corporate career into entrepreneurialism, because it's rarely one wonderful upward trajectory to the top, right? I mean, it also sounds like I suppose the business itself was not in a good place, so there's that to sort out. There's two, your deep rooted desire to want to do the right thing by the community and all of that kind of thing. But then there's I suppose you've not run a business like this before as well, so there's all manner of stuff in play that to me says, God, there's a story here, like in terms of how have you got from that idea of we'd love to take this on to where you are now.
So we've bumbled along is the honest answer, but I think I think we're on the right path. But I think certainly if you look back at our kind of first 12 months, it was very much sort of bumbling along. And so we saw this, had this idea. I actually then spoke to my ex-husband Ganika and said, "Oh God, look, this is the situation here, and I'm just wondering if that's something Mike and I could do. Perhaps we could raise some investment." And he said, well, actually, he would be happy to invest. And a friend of his that he did his MBA with in the US, he was happy to invest as well. Not happy, keen to invest. They were both equally sort of taken with this situation. And also, I think there was on the one hand this sort of situation that the people faced. On the other hand, there's this idea that, well, look, everybody drinks tea. The tea market is, in some ways, and it depends how you cut it, because there are so many different types of tea, but overall it's considered to be growing still as a category within food and beverage. So actually, it must be possible to run this in a way that is profitable. That was kind of the perhaps arrogant starting point. But nevertheless, we kind of raised investment from them. My mum and one of her brothers stayed on as shareholders. The others all sold out. So the transaction happened, and then February 2023, it was ours. So it's like, right.
What now?
Yeah, exactly. We were very lucky, though, because my cousin, who is a lawyer, so by no means his full-time job, but he'd been helping my mum and her siblings just keep an eye on things a little bit. And so he kindly kind of stayed on, and practically that meant popping in once a week just to kind of check that there was nothing terrible going on and kind of check that all the metrics looked vaguely right. But this was a business in distress.
5-star hospitality means having the right people in the right place at the right time, and that's exactly where RotaCloud can help. RotaCloud is the online platform that makes planning rotas, recording attendance, and managing annual leave easy. Its simple, drag-and-drop interface lets you create and share rotas with your team in minutes, while our built-in budgeting tools mean you'll know exactly how much you're spending on staffing before sending the rota out. RotaCloud also makes life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request time off, and pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be.
So very early on, I mean, you asked me earlier about mistakes. So at the beginning, we threw money and technology at certain things very naively. And it's not that the decisions were wrong in terms of technology, certainly, but if you'd understood the business and prioritized and looked for kind of root cause, that's not where you have started.
Right.
We also didn't realize, I mean, in terms of the community, we thought, right, we'll buy it, then they get to stay here and all good. We didn't realize quite how poor they were. And it's shocking. Incredibly.
Really?
Yeah, incredibly poor. Like, no, but when I say that, no more poor than communities from any other estate in Sri Lanka or Kenya or Assam or, anywhere else in India, Vietnam. It's not a unique poverty. But when you really engage with it, when you kind of work shoulder to shoulder, you realize really how hard it is and how grossly unfair it is. So that kind of struck us within, I'd say, the first quarter was us sort of trying to fix things operationally and bumbling along and making perhaps not the smartest decisions, but really understanding this community and understanding actually the enormity of what we'd taken on. Because now that we'd taken it on, it was our responsibility. And we wanted to fix this. It wasn't good enough for us to, if we turn, and we're still in process, so it's not something I can describe as done, but if we turned the Devagiri around in terms of the traditional tea producing model, it could be profit making, but it wouldn't be a big profit, and there wouldn't be enough in there to change the standard of living.
just going to ask you the reason. Why would that be? Because as you say, it's a growing category. Is there anybody in the UK that doesn't drink tea?
Exactly.
It's kind of that. It's that's the and that's only the UK. That's the quantity of people that we're talking about who consume the product.
Exactly. So I guess there are two sides to it. One side is on the supply side, if you like. So in Sri Lanka, the community that farm tea are a sort of a unique ethnic group who were brought over from India by the British when they were here, and they were brought over as indentured labour. And so now they are regular citizens of the country. They have the same labour rights as anybody else and minimum wage rights as anybody in a comparable kind of role. But they lost that kind of heritage of sort of economic capital, if you like. So there's no multi-generational wealth there. So for most people in Sri Lanka, they'll have something, the grandparents farm in the village, a piece of land, a house, something. This community has none of that. And this community has been paid at the bottom end now, at the very bottom end, for generations and generations. And that's meant that there's not been enough for them to create any kind of safety. So that's what the problem is. It's very, very precarious. And when you meet people, you see this. You'll meet, at Devagiri, you'll meet a family that actually, oh, look, both parents working, they seem all right. You'll meet another family where perhaps somebody's been ill, or there's been an unforeseen expense, and they're in dire straits. So it's that precarious. And on the supply side, that's why. But on the demand side, when you go to the supermarket and have a look at how much is being spent on tea, what you see there is not what goes back to the root.
Right.
I hear people sort of lamenting how cheap tea is. So sometimes people will say things like, gosh, can you believe that, tea bag is less than 10p a tea bag? But that actually is okay. At sort of anything above 6-7p a tea bag, it would be absolutely viable for people to be rewarded fairly if the supply chain was short. The problem is that you've got about 5 players in a very long supply chain. And I'm not saying that anyone's sort of, extracting money unfairly, but there are just too many players in there. You've got tea being sold in country at auction. It's bought then by an exporter. That exporter sells it to an international importer. That importer then sells it to a wholesaler. That wholesaler then sells it on to a UK tea brand, usually.
Right.
And then it ends up in retail. It's just too low. And the carbon footprint in that is unnecessary. It's untraceable because in that process the tea is blended, usually for economic reasons, which is why if you look on a kind of standard packet of tea, you often see it's a blend of Ceylon, which is Sri Lanka, Assam, and something else usually. So that's why too little goes back.
Yeah. And did you know this when you took it on?
No, I did not whatsoever. And it's really frustrating, but also, I'll be honest with you, it's good to know it because therein lies the solution.
Yeah.
The problem is very, very visible, very obvious, and we hope solvable, which is now, I suppose, what we've dedicated. So I think we understood that within our first 6 months. We understood that this was kind of the cause of the problem. And so ever since then, we've been trying to develop a farm-to-table brand. In the UK, it will be the first farm-to-table brand of any scale. You do get kind of small amounts of artisan tea sold at places like Fortnum and Mason, but that's not where we're playing. I mean, some of our teas, naturally, in the tea-making process, you end up producing about 16 different grades of tea, some of which are the top end. But overall, what we're trying to do here is just create an everyday cup of tea and sell an everyday cup of tea directly so that enough goes back. So it's not fancy tea. It's just good quality everyday tea.
Right. And again, this is just me thinking logically about the problems that you face by taking on this challenge, is that I would imagine that by looking to change the process of how things are distributed, that not everybody is a fan of that in that process, in terms of you've probably had to ruffle a few feathers.
Yes, it's interesting you ask that, because more recently we've started sort of being a bit more public, trying to get our message out there. And I've been sort of steeling myself for somebody going, "Oi, what are you doing?" Or somebody kind of coming up with some criticism against us or whatever. That's not happened yet.
Okay, good.
Probably because the industry is so big and the players are generally either the very big ones who wouldn't be threatened by us, or relatively kind of smaller businesses who perhaps, even if we did irritate them, may not let that be known. So far, we've not had any pushback, but it's hard. I mean, the other factor here is, Mike's was a senior partner at PwC. I was a sort of software expert at Toyota. What on earth do we know about FMCG? And that has been hard. And we've done this, I suppose, really organically, in the sense that our approach has been literally to find email addresses, send cold emails, pick up the phone, and just try and get in front of people. And that has proven a real challenge, because it's a noisy place, it's a noisy market. And until someone's actually met us, we're just another tea brand, when actually we are the only farm-to-table brand available. We think that's significant. But and actually, when someone has the chance to hear from us in full, they think that's significant too. But actually getting in front of the right people and having conversations proved very difficult.
Yeah, but I would imagine that's definitely worth persevering, right? Because I think also this kind of the renewed model, and I'm just going to pick on a previous guest for a second, a chap called, God, what's his bloody name? Jonathan Reed. God, they killed me if I got that wrong. He heads up a coffee company who have cafes throughout East Anglia in the main in the UK. But they're very, very focused on the social element of where the coffee comes from. And I think that you've landed on a focus which is right here and right now for people, is that people are becoming more aware, or want to become more aware of where is that thing that I'm drinking coming from, and what is the impact at the other end. Because you've probably already identified that actually by changing the model in your distribution, that you don't need to pass that. There's no extra cost to the consumer with that. Actually, there's a bigger chunk in the middle that can go back to the people who are doing the work.
And to be honest with you, we're able to offer a lower price to both the consumer and the retailer.
Right.
So margins we're able to offer retailers are higher than the norm. And for the consumer also, they're getting a single origin, single estate product for the price they'd normally pay for. I'm going to mention a brand just to contextualize it, but like say a standard box of Twinings, that's where we benchmark. But our tea is obviously single estate.
Right. Yeah.
So we're not benchmarking against the sort of niche artisan players at all. That's not our area, which is why we're saying we want it to be just good everyday tea. We're not trying to make excessive amounts of money. We're not trying to offer something flashy. What we're trying to demonstrate is that just regular tea can be done in a way that is fair.
Yeah, and I can only imagine then the impact that has on your locality in terms of, actually just giving the community a bit of a lift. Because I remember we did a little tea tour when my wife and I went on holiday in Mauritius. Just like dropping holiday bombs in here, but because we both love tea, and I suppose we're at a certain age now as well, where we used to do wine tours, but now a tea tour is way more appealing.
Yeah.
And we went on this thing, and the thing that I always remember, the beauty that comes with tea estates is just phenomenal. But two, a lot of the, I suppose, the factories and the buildings and the machinery and all of that really looked impoverished and really does not look safe. And and there's guys going around in the factory in flip flops and all, while they're right next to a machine that could take their leg off type thing. And so I'd imagine the upside stretches way beyond just even the financial gain that you can then give to these people, but actually, the working environment that you can create for them, and all of the things that we take for granted over here for sure.
Yes.
But yeah, what a wonderful opportunity.
You touch on something really important there, which is, I think, about dignity and kind of pride in your work. So the process of making tea is actually really complicated. And I think, for some reason, when it's marketed, all you see is the kind of green fields, and then there's this assumption that it just kind of, you just dry those leaves and it becomes tea. And actually, it's much more complicated than that. And it's very, very skilled. The way somebody plucks tea will affect how the bush grows, will affect the yield. So it's all very, very skilled. The way the bush is pruned, the amount of water it gets, the way you kind of grow shade around it, the nutrients it has, all of that is quite complex. And then once the leaves are picked, within a factory, you're absolutely right. So some of the machinery kind of dates back to sort of what was exactly the same as they'd have used 200 years ago. But then at the end of the process, it's now computer vision that's used to sort. However, and that is very, very complex. But as you say, in too many situations, you have a workforce who are not kitted out properly, are sort of, there's no dignity for them in what they're doing. And yes, safety is a factor, definitely. But generally, beyond just any physical risk, there's no dignity. And this is something kind of we want to bring to Devagiri, but also demonstrate that actually this is very skilled work and people should feel like they're doing skilled work. They should be rewarded like they're doing skilled work. And their day-to-day, you asked earlier about my kind of previous career. And for me, just as we think in a white-collar environment about individual motivation and fulfillment, and, in the corporate world, we think a lot about people's levels of, personal fulfillment and motivation and general satisfaction. And I don't think that should be reserved for white-collar jobs. I think, and in the UK, it's not reserved for white-collar jobs. But certainly in Sri Lanka, it tends to be. And on tea estates, I think there's two people thinking around that. So in addition to the kind of economic impact in direct terms, in terms of what they earn, we also want to help people really kind of feel proud of what they do and proud of the skill set they have, because it is a skill set. It's a valuable skill set. And I think this is the problem, because it's recognized too little in the financial reward. The whole thing is demeaned.
Yeah.
I think just to bring to life for you, when I talk about financial rewards, so at the moment, we're doing all that agricultural stuff, doing the kind of complex tea making process in the factory. We will get between £2 and £3 for a kilo of tea. So that's an entire kilo.
A lot of tea.
A lot of tea, because the average tea bag has between 1.5 and 2 grams in it. It's a lot of tea.
That's a lot of tea, yeah.
It's a lot of tea. So by the time you're in the supermarket, you will pay maybe £5 for a box of 50 tea bags. And obviously the retailer will pay the supplier less. But you can see that differential, because a box of 50 tea bags is 100 grams of tea, no more than 100 grams of tea. So if at the end that 100 grams is worth £5, but at the beginning 1 kilo is worth just £2.
Yeah,
you can see
it's a massive gap.
And so it would be transformation.
Yeah, and when you map out the numbers like that, it's very easy to see that the potential is there to do that for sure. Like, it's not like it's the margin's been rinsed within an inch of its life. There is margin there to get that wonderful thing that I believe all businesses in the world should be working towards, which is the win-win situation, right? The retailer wins, the consumer wins, and the producer wins. So that's a win-win-win, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's such a change, because it's been like this for 200 years. So I guess in defense of the status quo, it's not, I suppose, if somebody doesn't realize it's broken, it's kind of, there's no imperative to change. And I think that's what the message we're trying to get out there. We're trying to sort of say, well, this is broken and it should be better. But yeah, it's a hard one to get out there.
Yeah, well, I'm in awe of your journey so far in terms of to this point, notwithstanding taking on a business that you know nothing about, learning about that business and in the, I suppose, learn as you go kind of fashion, then understanding it in a bit more depth, unpicking it now a little bit in terms of what has come before does not have to determine what comes next, and but notwithstanding, still producing a wonderful, wonderful product, which is ultimately, what you also need to focus on, right? You can't just be creating a substandard product.
Absolutely. And look, that was a journey as well. I mean, when we started, there were problems in the factory. So our tea had a slightly smoky quality. And neither Mike or I, as we said, had any expertise. And so actually that was because our dryer, so we use these wood-burning dryers, and there were leaks in the pipes there. And so smoke was bleeding through, and that's what that was. And so I'd say we spent our first year making sure that our quality was absolutely consistent and making sure that, I mean, the Devagiri has been producing tea since 1947 and has produced some of the best tea previously. So just though fixing these little things that in recent times have gone wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the wonderful stuff, the product itself. talk me through, because you were very kind enough to send me through some samples of 4 of your different, what do you call them? Infusions, do we call it? Yes? Yep.
Yes.
And then, but also kind of your everyday loose leaf English breakfast tea, for one of in fact, that might even be what it's called. I can't remember, but yeah. And wonderful product, without question. Were these products all in existence, or have you had to kind of redevelop your product base?
Yeah, we've had to productize our product is probably the best way to describe it. So Davy has been producing all this tea. So we kind of produce over 80,000 kilos of tea per month. It's a lot of tea. And it comes out in these various grades, as I mentioned. And it's interesting because there's such a disconnect. On the supply side, there's the 16 grades of tea, which are to do with particle size and shape and color. At the demand side, at the end, actually, it's about sort of tea bags and packaging and what's it called and what's the flavor. And so, whereas we've been operating under the kind of traditional model of just sending all our grades to auction, we had to think about, well, how do we turn this into something that's ready to be bought? So in that sort of supply chain, this is what others would do along the way. So the importer would order from the exporter X number of kilos of the BOP1 category, which they then blend with something else, and then the UK brand would package it and market it and so on. So, and that, I mean, the term breakfast tea doesn't actually mean anything. So you'll find different companies, their breakfast teas taste very slightly different. Your breakfast tea can be whatever you want it to be.
Yep, I like mine with vanilla, it seems.
Yes, yes. So for us, it was a process of understanding, well, actually, where could we offer the best experience to a UK buyer, and putting that together in terms of the infusions, in terms of the breakfast tea product. We had to think about packaging. We had to think about being sustainable. I mean, this is one of the massive advantages about being a kind of new player. We had no legacy. So we could start as we meant to go on. So all of our packaging and product is 100% biodegradable. So tea bags sometimes get a bit of a negative press because people assume they're not environmentally friendly. Ours are actually made of plant starch. So we had the opportunity to do all of that, and the style of packaging as well. If I'm honest, done on an absolute shoestring because we just don't have the money for.
Really? It's very cool though. Very cool.
Thank you.
And also, you can even like when you pick up, and I know this is a podcast, so people can't see this, but maybe there'll be a video of this someday in the future. Even like you can kind of almost tell that everything in here is recyclable, or there's no plastic anywhere. And I just think the branding is just kind of cool. It's just,
thank you.
It's very approachable. That's what it feels like.
Thank you. That's very, very good of you to say so. And that's thank you, because that's exactly what we wanted. That everyday, good quality, honest, transparent. That's what we wanted to convey.
Yeah, well, you're certainly achieving that. What I really, really love about this, I mean, there's so many things that I love about your journey, but you've come into this thing naively, as we have discussed, but also not, fully not realizing the challenge ahead of you. And I'm guessing you're kind of having to learn a lot of this as you just go with the flow of it, because you've now learned about packaging, and you've now learned about product. How do you actually develop the product, and now you're looking at distribution of that, straight to source, as opposed to through all of these different channels. So these are all just skills that I would imagine that you didn't anticipate that you'd have to get involved in straight away, but here we are.
It's all been new. And I think, therefore, it's been great. I mean, for Mike, certainly, that's exactly what he was looking for in his kind of second career, if you like. So, but a massive challenge. I mean, I mentioned the dryers earlier. That's a great example of something going wrong and us being a bit blindsided. Like, oh, God, what's happened?
Yeah.
It's been great. I say that, though. I should say, obviously, we have an excellent estate manager who works with us and who runs things. And obviously, within David Giri, there are people who have deep expertise. So this sort of naivety is limited really to myself and Mike. There are 150 people behind this product.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's great, really great. The direction of travel seems really, really positive. In terms of where could people get your tea in the UK or anywhere else actually? Where are you distributing to at the moment?
So we've got a few stockists in the UK. In terms of that product range that you have there, Mont 58 is the best place to go. So they have a website. They are a great independent coffee roaster. But we also stocked at a few restaurants and hotels. So the whole Oakman's Inns and Restaurant chain has our products. So there's Hoppers, which is one of the JKS restaurants.
Yeah.
And we are with a number of independent specialist tea retailers as well. So we are, it is available, but not as widely available as we'd like. And actually, within the next couple of weeks, hope to make it possible for people to buy off our website as well, Derek.
Right. Superb. I mean, and I suppose this is the thing you're on a journey. You've got to pick your battles, right? You can't just go all in on every single thing at once.
We've also been learning, really, where's our sweet spot?
Yeah.
Who wants to stock this? Why would somebody want to stock it? So, yeah.
Yeah, superb. And I suppose the final question, therefore, is what's next? But I mean, it sounds like it's pretty obvious that it's just a continuation of what you've built on already, but you tell me.
Well, I hesitate a little because I'm conscious that what's next is ambitious, but we really, really would like to get some mainstream large-scale retail listings. Ultimately, the dream, and I appreciate it may not happen anytime soon, but the dream would be for our tea to be sold as a standard in supermarkets, and also for us to have partnerships in hospitality where we're providing the in-room tea. So the afternoon tea experience is very, very different because it has to be curated and you've got teas from all over the world. But actually, hotel in-room tea is a real opportunity for a hotel to show that transparency, that kind of ownership of their supply chain. And that's, we're in a few interesting discussions around there. I mentioned Oakman Inns, but we'd really like to expand on that.
Yeah, well, all I can say is having tasted your product, it's brilliant, and two, you're kind of taking away a lot of barriers as to why people should say no to you as well, because one, you can offer them no differential in margins, probably even by the sounds of it, a better margin.
Yes.
On the way that they purchase their tea. You're socially conscious, which everybody is looking at now as part of their supply chain in terms of where are our products coming from. So you kind of, if I was your business development person, I'd be the question I'd be asking is, why wouldn't you do this? You need to give me a reason why you wouldn't do it, because the product's good and you have all of these other things in your corner as well. So I think personally, you're destined for success. It's just a question of the time that it takes to get there, I suppose.
Yeah. I hope so. I very much hope so. And we're enjoying the journey, but I very much hope so. And that's such a kind endorsement from you. I wish you were our BD person.
Well, let's talk off. Let's talk off. Yeah, brilliant. Well, what I really, really love about your story as well is that, and I come back to this 19-year-old you, is that your 19-year-old you now, I think, would look at you and go, yeah, well done. I get the journey now.
Do you know, it's funny, I hadn't really thought about that till you asked me these questions. So
really?
It's like, yes, so, but no, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, and I just really love that, because I've just come back to this. I just had a conversation 2 days ago with a guy in the US who's written a wonderful book called Black Sheep, and it's all about finding your values, the unshakable, unmovable values that do not change throughout your life. And having that conversation has sparked these questions in me around people's motivations and where do they come from and all of that. So I can totally see that what you're doing is deep rooted in your value set for sure, because otherwise why would you take on all of this challenge that you've taken on unless it was speaking to a very deep part of you?
Yeah. No, thank you. Yes, hadn't really reflected on it, but it does absolutely resonate.
Brilliant. Good stuff. Well, I mean, all I can say is I wish you well with the next phase. It sounds really, really exciting. And yeah, look, I'll be charting your progress big style.
Thank you so much for having me on. I loved it. Thank you.
You're absolutely welcome. Take care.
And there we have it. It was amazing to get some time with Roshana, and I think we can all agree what she and her team are trying to achieve is just wonderful. Imagine a business model that rewards everyone through the process fairly. Surely that is all what we're aiming to achieve. We'll be back again next Wednesday 8 PM with another story from hospitality, so have a great week, and I'll see you then.